Waking Up to Serenity, Unlocking the Door to Emotional Sobriety by Angelo. Chapter 13, Spiritual Awakening. If the promises describe what a spiritual awakening should be like, then it's probably fair to say that few, if any of us, have had the full experience. We have each undoubtedly made some progress, but perhaps not as much as we may previously have believed. Steps 10, 11 and 12 are often referred to as the maintenance steps. The trouble with the word maintenance is that it can tend to imply a status quo. It can be interpreted to mean that I just need to maintain my sobriety and that all will be well. The final 3 steps are also sometimes referred to as the growth steps. This is a more useful and accurate term. Steps 10, 11 and 12 are intended to bring about an ever-deepening spiritual awakening. Step 10 is about becoming increasingly self-aware. Through practice, we start to continually notice when we are thinking and acting as a personal ego self, rather than as an individuation of universal consciousness. First we notice, then we recommit to letting go of self-identity. Step 11 encourages the spiritual practices of prayer and meditation as effective tools to aid the inner journey. The primary purposes of prayer are thanksgiving and surrender. The purpose of meditation is to practice abiding at increasingly deeper states of being. We move back from cushion 1 towards cushion 3. Step 12 suggests that we then lead a life based on spiritual principles and also use our specific experience with addiction to help others into recovery. The message that we carry is not just that we are sober, but more importantly, that we've had a spiritual awakening. In order to carry this message, it has to be true. The more genuine the spiritual awakening, the more effective the message. I mentioned previously that the states of being are not permanent positions. Our identity moves around within the spectrum of consciousness, and hence our experience changes. If we awaken from cushion 1 into cushion 2, this does not mean that we will remain there. We can easily go back to sleep. Indeed, there are powerful forces pulling us towards cushion 1. Firstly, we are habitually used to living life from cushion 1, so much so that it has become our default setting. And secondly, there seems to be an almost hypnotic pull towards the material world and all of its activity. We try to sink into the depths of the ocean, but buoyancy keeps taking us back up to the surface. This is why we need to practice, and to keep practicing, every moment of every single day, one day at a time. Gradually, we will find that we can naturally operate below the surface, and that the promises begin to become our experience. In his book on spirituality and the 12 steps, entitled Breathing Underwater, Richard Rohr quotes a beautiful poem written by Carol Bielek. The wording is as follows. Quote, I built my house by the sea. Not on the sands, mind you, not on the shifting sand, and I built it of rock. A strong house by a strong sea. And we got well acquainted, the sea and I, good neighbours. Not that we spoke much. We met in silences, respectful, keeping our distance, but looking our thoughts across the fence of sand. Always the fence of sand our barrier, always the sand between. And then, one day, and I still don't know how it happened, the sea came without warning, without welcome even. Not sudden and swift, but a shifting across the sand like wine, less like the flow of water than the flow of blood. Slow, but coming. Slow, but flowing like an open wound. And I thought of flight, and I thought of drowning, and I thought of death. And while I thought, the sea crept higher till it reached my door. And then I knew there was neither flight, nor death, nor drowning. That when the sea comes calling, you stop being neighbours, well acquainted, friendly at glance neighbours, and you give your house for a coral castle, and you learn to breathe underwater. Close quote. Well, this poem fits nicely into our metaphor of the ocean of universal consciousness, and it reveals great wisdom. We build our lives, and we believe that they have solid foundations. Our conscience whispers to us, but generally we carry on regardless. We may have a concept of a higher power, but it's at a distance, like a neighbour. But slowly, the consequences of addiction overwhelm us. We want to escape or die, but it keeps getting worse. We reach that moment of desperation and then we surrender. We fear letting go of the personal ego self and slipping below the surface, lest we drown and cease to exist. But the tide keeps rising, and eventually we are underwater anyway. And consciousness is right here and is no longer a neighbour. We have exchanged our old lives for something far better. And we find that we still exist as an individual, despite not being a personal ego self. We thought we would drown, but actually we find that we can breathe underwater. There's nothing to fear. Well, I've never met anyone who has had a spiritual awakening and wants to go back to their old life. Not only is it possible to live life without reference to the personal ego self, but it is also unimaginably better. You too can breathe underwater and experience the previously unseen life below the surface. In order to do so, all we need to do is to be painstaking about our recovery and hence our awakening. There are, however, many pitfalls and subtle traps that can keep us stuck on the surface. The next chapter explores these risks so that we can be aware of them.